This is my last, so I'm done with this today. No, I think I have one more at 9:30. So
Oh
there's one more.
God. It's like right after this call, it's back to back.
Back to back. Yeah.
My God.
All the best.
Yeah, all the best.
It's fine. This is all very interesting, so I'm not tired generally.
This is very much
Unless
like
it
an
is.
accelerated learning. Oh, sorry. I think people have joined.
Yeah. Hey, how is Facebook? Okay, we'll talk about Facebook.
Yeah.
Hello, Nandita.
Hi Sanjay, hi Hassan, hi Vaishali.
Hello, Kip.
Hey, how are you doing?
I see Kip has joined. Kip, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sanjay. Yes, I'm on.
Great. Can you hear me clearly and the rest of the team here?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, all right. So, others will also probably. So, Kip, thanks for joining us. Nandita, is anyone else going to join from your team?
For my team, no, it's just going to be me.
No, I was asking Nandita.
Sanjay, they will join. They'll just be joining. Probably they're still not reached back home. They're on the way.
All right. So
They'll be
so
joining,
you
but
will.
yes.
Okay, good. So, Kip, thanks for joining. We can actually start the call. The key people that we need on the call are here. There are two startups who are interested in, and have a vested interest in the training, as a specialty. One is uh, uh, Mercius, which is a company that does a lot of good work in AR, VR, and XR, and another is Empro, which is actually an internal Boeing startup, and their interest is maintenance and training activities. So, what we will do is we will have the teams introduce themselves in 1 or 2 minutes each, and then we will open it up to you. You can introduce yourself, followed by which you can walk us through your, for 10 to 15 minutes, what your perspectives are on the training as an activity, as a business area. And then we'll open it up for questions. So we'll have about 40 minutes for questions. Does that sound okay?
Sure, no problem. Yeah,
Sounds good?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So, Nandita, why don't you start with an introduction, followed by that Vaishali or Hassan?
Sure, Sanjay. Hi Kip. Good morning. Thanks for
Morning.
joining and doing this for us. So at Empro, what we are trying to do is basically trying to address the maintenance problem. We're trying to um, kind of make the main the offline availability of manuals and have record the resolutions, that is maintenance logs and defect logs, in such a way that there can be a predictive analysis done on it based on what defects were solved and how this was solved, um, and also predict what would be the failure in case of any defects that are logged, how what was the probability of that failure and how it was it addressed earlier. So we kind of want to capture these knowledge which was there with the technicians, or knowledge in terms of dirty slips, into a database, kind of a knowledge base, which can uh, provide a lot of analytics, and even give a predictive analysis on what will happen. And all this we want to do with the voice-based virtual assistant, so that a technician, when he's on the job, he can easily connect, and a solution is available for him right when he's doing his work in the aircraft maintenance side. So this is a brief about us, Kip.
Excellent. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Hi, Kip. Thank you so much for your time. So this is Vaishali from Mercius. So our company essentially is, trying to change how businesses are conducting training and prototyping
Actually,
with the use of. Ha, Sanjay, sorry.
actually, your voice is not good, so you may need to get closer to the microphone or pick up the phone.
Is this better?
There is, we hear, but there is a breakup on and off, and so it's not consistent. So see what you can do.
Okay, Hassan, can you try?
Hi Sanjay, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, this is good.
All right. So, Kip, good morning. My name is Hassan. I'm Vaishali's co-founder at Mercius. Just to give you the background on what we're doing is we're enabling organizations to create training content using augmented and virtual reality. And these technologies have proven themselves, including at Boeing itself, where they've noticed a 75% reduction in training time. And what we are trying to do is, through our software Red, democratize the capability to create AR, VR training material so that more people can start adopting it.
Okay, great.
Kip, can you
So,
give a
so
brief introduction to what you do so we kind of have a full context?
yeah, absolutely. So hi everybody, and as I think you see, my name is Kip Kojima. So I'm a product strategist for the specifically the maintenance training side of the training and professional services team here at Boeing. So my specific role is to within our entire product portfolio of things that we are providing to the industry for maintenance training and also cabin training as well. But since this is a maintenance specific discussion, I'll stick to maintenance. Evaluating what the industry needs are and how we need to transform in order to meet those needs. And then from there, identify what product spaces we need to fill. And then working with the product managers that are also on my team, work with them to identify products to fit in those spaces and then go from all the way from concept through implementation to go to market to actually delivering products out to the industry.
Kip,
Yes.
Kip, I don't know if it is me, but I can barely hear you. I don't know if it's the same problem for others on the call. But if you can just get closer to the microphone again, I'm sorry to bug you and interrupt you like this.
Yeah. Well, actually, can I ask the people on the phone if they can hear me? Because I'm using a headset and I'm speaking pretty much directly into a microphone. So.
Okay. Okay.
You're
All right,
clear,
let's
Kip.
continue.
Okay.
Okay. Then it is me. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. Yeah, Sanjay, I'll just keep going on and please feel free to interrupt me again if you're still having issues. But in general, it's kind of where we're currently headed for in kind of a long-term strategy view for maintenance training here at Boeing is we're trying to answer, I'd say probably two major needs within the industry at the moment. And it's a lot of it speaks to the projects you are working on. So one is just increasing student learning cognition and understanding of systems rather than just memorizing material. So one thing that is identified quite frequently is that students, when they're going through training and they're going through courseware, they're pretty much just memorizing the material required to pass the assessments at the end and therefore get their certification, but they struggle to actually understand the systems that they're learning about afterwards. So in order to address that, we're looking at ways to get away from the traditional classroom-based, a single instructor stands up at the front and delivers all the courseware material in a very linear fashion, just using straight presentations and lesson books. So anything that we can do to build in more experiential learning and self-paced learning and more adaptive learning. We're looking at all of that in order to transform the student experience when it comes to actually learning the material. So that's one area that we're targeting pretty heavily and trying to focus our products around. Then the other aspect is trying to drive a training's ability to affect a customer airline's operational performance. So out at the customer side, the metrics that they are constantly following to make sure that they are performing the best that they can is centered around operational performance metrics like delays and cancellation and parts usage and troubleshooting time and things that really affect how quickly and how well they can get an aircraft off the ground. So historically, for Boeing's training department, our customer was traditionally viewed as being the training departments at those customer airlines. We're trying to move away from that and now target more so the actual maintenance operations groups out at the airlines, since they are the ones that are receiving the trained aircraft maintenance technicians. So anything we can do to make a technician better at troubleshooting and make them better at being able to get aircraft off the ground and off the gate when they're scheduled to do so, that's the other area we're starting to focus our efforts on as well. So that's what we're looking at right now, and so far from both teams, I'm hearing things that are very familiar and aligned with where we're going at the moment.
Cool. Vaishali, do you want to get going with some questions for
Sanjay, were you able to hear all of that at some point, hopefully?
I heard. I switched to headphones so I could hear. I was asking Vaishali if she wants to get started with the Q&A, and Shiraz, Nandita, you guys too. And then we can have a free flowing. It's just a small audience, so we can just have share questions with Kip and have a dialogue.
Hey Sanjay, you're now very quiet. I can barely hear you now.
Oh, okay. Audible now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So this is interesting. So with my headphones, I could hear you loud and clear, but it doesn't work with the mic. So I was asking Vaishali to open up the questions, or Hassan, and Shiraz, Nandita, you guys follow up, and then we can have a free flowing discussion. It's just a small audience here today.
Just kind of barely. It's very faint. Yes, now I can hear you clearly. It sounds great on my end. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So as I touched upon it, we're trying to get away from linear like PowerPoint presentations and classroom activities to more experiential learning. So it always comes up the way to describe it is learning by doing, right? So ideally, in the most ideal world, a student, rather than reading how to do a procedure, they actually go out and perform it on an aircraft. Well, so the problem with that is if you're training a student and you're expecting them to make mistakes along the way and learn via actually performing the task and having mistakes along the way, you can't really do that on a real physical aircraft because obviously you don't want to mess up the aircraft. So we see AR, VR, XR all playing a heavy role in that, and simulation, and being able to provide a student an environment where they can actually perform a task on a synthetic or simulated aircraft, and potentially make mistakes and try variations on the procedure, and learn via that way without actually damaging or having to get access to an actual real airplane. So for maintenance, I think that's probably the key area where we're looking for AR, VR. But even farther looking than that, in terms of affecting operational, the aspect where I talked about affecting operational performance, ideally, when we're talking about affecting the operational performance of an airline, we're looking at primarily looking at micro learning opportunities and just-in-time training. And when you're trying to distill training down into those tiny bite-sized pieces, you want to be able to deliver those bits of training in line with a technician's like day-to-day activities. So it's often outside of training. It's often kind of mentioned as the vision for just maintenance in general, is that someday a technician will be out by an aircraft wearing an AR headset, and everything they do currently to reference manuals, paper manuals, or even PDFs, even if it's on a tablet, that would all be displayed in line with their vision on an AR headset. Well, if we take that vision, which is for the general industry in itself, and start applying that to training, we want to also, within that AR viewpoint, look for opportunities to deliver just-in-time training and micro-learning activities into that same sight line for the technicians. So those are the two areas where we see AR, VR, XR playing a role going forward. Yeah, yeah, sure. So to address the micro-learning question, so right now when we go through a training course so maybe I should step back. For students, for us, it's specifically an aircraft maintenance technician. So these are the mechanics that are down by the plane, either performing maintenance tasks or fixing an aircraft when there's an issue identified. So we refer to those folks as students. Our primary students. We also offer engineering courses for engineers, but the bulk of what we do and the bulk of what we're trying to affect are those aircraft technicians. So those are our students. And then on the micro-learning piece, so when we are training those students or we're training those technicians, right now, some of our courses, they're 30-day long courses. And when a student is taking that course, they're expected to be present in a classroom to take that course for those 30 days. And how we're delivering that training material is we have a thick lesson book that is it's not unlike any other textbook that you would see in school, and it's like page after page after page of information, and the instructor is teaching to that. Ideally, we want to get away from those thick lesson books and start to modularize them into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, so we have a better means to adapt the curriculum to the student's needs. So, for instance, if a student comes in and he already knows pretty well, maybe the pneumatics section of aircraft, rather than having to put him through the entire course, which includes a section that he is already heavily familiar with, we can maybe potentially remove that portion because we've now modularized the material. We can maybe remove that pneumatics section from the course, and then just teach him everything else that he or she needs. But that's just my modularization. That isn't getting into micro-learning yet. So the next step from modularization is going down to the micro-learning stage, where within a particular module of a larger training course, can we break that down even further, even to even smaller bite-sized pieces? So If we're talking about a particular aircraft section, let's say electronics, um, within the electronics section of a lesson, that may cover several subsystems underneath of that. If a student just needs to learn about a very specific single component, that's further modularization. And then if you get even further down into that particular system, it could come down to what is the removal procedure, what is the installation procedure, and what is the especially for electronics, what is the software loading procedure for that component? Once you are able to break it down into that procedure by procedure and step by step point, that's where we're starting to talk about micro learning. So a micro learning could be something as short as, oh, this is how you update the software on this component. And once you've broken it down into that micro learning, that's something that now you can potentially take out of the classroom and training world and put into the operational world. So if an aircraft is coming in and they know it needs to have a particular piece of software loaded while it's sitting at the gate waiting for its next flight, potentially we could take that one piece of information and deliver that to the student before the airplane comes in and lands, which was something that you can't currently do because we have this big long 30 or multi-day course. So the goal, the micro learning is that very, very almost smallest fundamental piece of a larger learning experience, and the goal for breaking it into those little tiny pieces is so that we can start delivering training in a more spread out fashion rather than go sit in a classroom for X number of days. So we're testing out microlearning, and I should mention, especially with microlearning, there is no one technology that necessarily fits everything that microlearning does. We almost want to take it on a case by case basis of identifying what is the microlearning that we're trying to achieve, and then from there just decide what is the best way to satisfy that microlearning requirement. So in some cases it may be AR VR, but right now because probably to another part of your question, and I'll respond to it more later. But since AR VR is still, at least for us, kind of in a proof of concept phase, we are not doing anything with AR VR currently on microlearning that's in a production ready state. Right now, in terms of things we're doing, it's mostly videos, short videos, because that is something we can fairly easily do right now. We are in the proof of concept stage when it comes to AR VR for microlearning and for other things. In the maintenance space, it's still very much that proof of concept phase. We are driving heavily to get to a production state on products for AR VR. However, on the flight training side, and I know this discussion was supposed to be mostly about maintenance, but on the flight training side, they're a little farther along because pilots are more used to working in simulated environments, especially when it comes to full flight simulators. So, since our group and our group covers both flight and maintenance and cabin training, we're all in various states when it comes to AR VR, but specifically with maintenance, we're pretty much in the proof of concept stage right now. Yeah, it's and even now it's still a kind of an evolving discussion on how best do we leverage experiential learning and simulated environments like AR, VR in addressing the total range of activities that have to go on and to bring a student up to a certain competency and knowledge level. So when it comes to AR, VR, and simulation, that it's at an area where we very specifically want to target portions of a course that require that opportunity for a student to actually try out what they're learning in some environment where they can do that without necessarily affecting or damaging an aircraft. So if they're going through a total course and there is a large theory portion where we're just teaching how a particular system works, we're going through the course, the theory portion. Usually, that's probably not the best opportunity for a simulated environment. That's probably what we like to call an active synoptic, which is just a graphical representation of how a system works and how things flow. So if we take like the pneumatics system, for example, it'll be a very graphical representation of here's the airplane engine, and here is a pneumatic valve, and here is some other component, and there will be an animation that shows how air flows from the engine through this valve and onto the subsequent components. For system theory, that's probably an overall system function. That's probably sufficient. We're not seeing a lot of real value in AR, VR, or simulated technologies to address that. Where we do now see the simulated environments is now once the student has been taught that system overview and overall system functionality, there will be sections where it says, okay, now if you need to replace this particular pneumatic valve, you would need to turn this knob and go flip this switch and then unbolt these things and then remove this, and then once you put the replacement in, you need to hook up this tube to this tube or hose to hose or whatever. When it gets to that stage, that's where it is most beneficial to be placing them into a simulated environment, because it's the best way that they're going to learn that material is to actually try it out for themselves. So that's where we're right now we're identifying the most value for AR, VR, XR, and simulated environments. So we do have people internal to Boeing who are doing those proof of concepts that is discussed. So we do have capable people doing that, but it's a very small set of folks, and we realize that once we get from out of the proof of concept and into the actual production marketable products, that's where we understand, because it's so much larger than just doing the proof of concept. That's where we understand that it's going to have to be more than just us. We're going to have to partner with outside firms to get through the large body of work that is required to not only author content for future aircraft deliveries, but the intent is also to go back and all the courseware that we've already authored for existing aircraft models out there. We need to convert that into I guess what we would call the modernized courseware. So that we do really well understand. We shouldn't be doing that ourselves. I don't think we can do that ourselves, and that's what we're going to be looking for partners going forward. That would be correct. So, I mean, we try to focus, at least the team that's here, we try to focus everybody to make sure that they're doing what they are most capable and best at doing. So we have a lot of instruction systems designers. So these are the folks that, they're very good at taking a concept or a training objective and then designing a course to properly deliver that to a student. But that's just kind of the high level outline, I guess, if you will, or the structure on how to deliver that on that learning objective. When it comes to actually, typing out the script and definitely when it comes to generating a proper 3D model and attaching, whatever learning objectives go along with that three-dimensional model and how all that comes together, that's not necessarily something that we want instructional designers to be doing, and it's definitely not the conversion of older course
Vaishali,
that you. So
Vaishali, let us give an opportunity to Nandita and Shiraz to talk about their digital assistant. So Nandita, why don't you, okay, yeah. Not no. It is not half an hour. It's not half an hour. You didn't start until about 10 minutes past. So that's not. I'm not counting minutes. But it also needs to be a free flowing two-way. They need to ask. You will gain out of that conversation too. So so you have this. Put this across. No problem. Sure. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two challenges that we're facing when it comes to that creation of material is one is are the tools required in order to create that material, which is exactly what you've just described. And the other aspect is just the I guess the manpower in order to churn through all of that. So, but yeah, absolutely. So I mean, whatever we can do to make it easier and faster to convert from legacy material to the AR, VR, XR space, then yes, yeah, that provides a lot of value to us.
Thanks, Vaishali. Kip, I would like to say that we working the Empro team. We are from product systems, so which even otherwise we work closely with BGS and particularly training and professional services as well. Shiraz is one of the managers in product systems, so and like we are part of Cactus and eMod, which also comes under the training and professional services and BGS in particular. So
okay, great. Yeah.
That said, one question I had was I know that in particular training and professional services also collaborate with the business intelligence and training analytics, if I'm right. So I was just wondering how analytics here is useful in the training side and what sort of data that you look into in terms of specific terms for maintenance? And what is that data you use from the maintenance side? If you could throw some light on that, that would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's very timely because we're having these discussions pretty much right now at the moment. So when it comes to data and analytics, there's two main areas that we really need that level of information in instrumentation. So one is trying to track our learning effectiveness. So as we're going through this transformation to get away from the legacy teaching methodologies and into this new way, we need to be able to prove that this new way of teaching really is more effective, or is actually, or at best case or worst case, not negatively affecting learning. So we are in discussions and trying to figure out, and probably really in need of a solution to figure out to baseline, figure out some way to baseline how much of the current material is a student retaining. And right now, pretty much the only data point we have for that is the assessments or the tests that are given at the end of a course. And then but really we probably need more than just those tests. If there's some other way to gather insight and intel into determining how much of the material the student is retaining. We're having discussions around it, but we don't have any concrete way of identifying that at the moment. But from that baseline, we then need to be able to then gather information and data on how much, now that we're teaching students in this new method, are we using this new type of media or this new delivery method? What was the effectiveness of that? What happened? How has that changed how much the student has retained? Is it making it better? Is it making it worse? Are there other areas for improvement in there? So so in terms of just learning and teaching effectiveness, that is one major area where we need instrumentation and good data analytics. And then the second area is when that technician goes back to his job and is out in the field, how effective was that training in terms of improving his or her ability to fix the aircraft? So, and this is where it's now probably going away from collecting data on the student itself, and probably more so collecting data on the airline's operational performance. So, if there was previous metrics being captured around, let's say the number of hours, labor hours it was taking to fix a particular component or a particular system or a particular common aircraft maintenance issue, if post-training now the metrics are starting to play out that it's now taking fewer labor hours, or there's less subsequent discrepancies being brought up, then that is how we are proving that the training was actually effective, and it's actually now starting to affect the performance for that airline's operational metrics. So that's another really key area, because that's for us, that's how we would have to sell our training programs. We would have to be able to go to a customer and say, hey, if you take our Boeing training, we can affect your performance metrics by X%. And that's how they determine, and how we determine, what the value is of that training, and therefore entice them to purchase from us. So those are the two major areas that we see as real needs for data analytics.
Thanks, Kip. That's great insight. But I have a follow-on question for this. I mean, for any analytics to be, to be accurate, what is the sample size of data that we have, and what is that we're talking about? Because otherwise it will be skewed. And where do we get this from?
Sure. So on the student learning portion of it, ideally we would want to capture all the data that is available for students that are taking Boeing training. So if you look at the total pool of available aircraft maintenance technicians who need training. Boeing only serves a certain portion of that. Otherwise, our competitors serve some of it, and the airlines themselves do a lot of training on their own. So they're also
Exactly where my point came from. Yeah.
Yeah. So at least for Boeing, right now for learning retention and analytics, it's pretty much restricted to the students that are passing through Boeing for training. It's an interesting question because actually I haven't even really thought about if it's possible to gather it any other way. But typically the training that's being performed by the airlines, we don't have insight into that. Going forward, we are looking to partner with some of our competitors to create more of a network of training capabilities for Boeing. So in which case, if we do set up a partnership with another company who is able to provide training, we would probably include some kind of data sharing agreement with that. But at this exact moment, we don't have any of those. And then however, on the operational performance side, that's where we actually do have quite a bit of data. So for Boeing, because we are the aircraft manufacturer, a lot of our customers, they participate in something called the ISDP, which is the I'm trying to remember what the acronym stands for, but it's the
Yes, Kip, we've heard of ISTP where the airlines actually pull in the maintenance log data and how their maintenance operations were carried out, right?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Great. So if you're aware of it, that's awesome because yeah. So that's where for that operational performance data, I think that's going to be a major source of knowledge that we're getting, since that is coming from all the airlines and it's all available to us and it's all here. That's one of the key areas we're looking to for analyses on how maintenance is how training is affecting the operational performance out of the airlines.
So all the so this data which comes from the airlines are how maintenance operations are carried out and how the defects were resolved. These data, right? So do you also use data which come from, let's say, my Boeing fleet or AHM, and those allied services which are within the BGS portfolios?
So not at the moment, although I am very interested in doing that, especially with my Boeing fleet. Maybe not so much my Boeing fleet, but toolbox, Boeing toolbox, and 787 toolbox and regular toolbox. So there is at least at the moment there is a training tab in there. So that would be a good source of information if we are increasing our delivery or training via toolbox. It'd be good to know how frequently that information is getting hit. AHM, I don't. We've had a lot of discussions about better integrating with AHM. So when I was describing delivery of just-in-time training earlier, part of that vision is if AHM is reporting out a defect on an aircraft before it comes in. The ideal goal is that once AHM identifies that issue, then when it gets assigned to a technician, we would also provide them with an option to take a just-in-time or a micro-learning type training in order to make sure that they're prepared to fix that issue that was previously identified by AHM. So we've talked about that level of integration. At this point, we haven't really discussed if there's any data to be pulled out of AHM that we can leverage for training. I don't see why not. I actually just thinking through it right now. I can say that's probably a good source to follow up on. But at this point, we haven't had a lot of discussion around that.
So maybe Nandita, you can take this as a follow-up exercise. Maybe you can engage with Kip and do some of that assessment.
Yeah, Sanjay. So, Kip, actually, we were trying to, build something on top of AHM and Toolbox, um, so that we have that data source with us while building something, which can act as an assistant while simultaneously doing some predictive analysis and sort of a prognostic tool. So that's where we were trying to see if there is something in the pipeline for using AHM Toolbox and especially for training. We also explored that in Toolbox there's a tab for training. So do you all use data from that, or what exactly in training do you all see there? Um, what is that feature more is what I wanted to know.
So the training function in Toolbox, we are aware that it's there. We're not doing a very good job of leveraging it. Where we are currently is we are, again, very almost pretty much nothing that is concrete at the moment, but other than discussions about that, hey, we need to leverage this better. The thing that we're trying to resolve at the moment is, at least what we're hearing so far for the next generation version of Toolbox, Horizon, I think, which is unrelated to Horizon X, but the next generation of Toolbox that's supposed to be coming out at some point, there's been discussions about that training tab going away. So we're not 100%. We're still kind of getting clarity from that team, from the Toolbox team, of whether that tab is going to exist, or if it's going to be, the Toolbox is just going to turn into a portal to our portal. So we're currently in the process of developing out a new portal into Boeing training, and it could be it's for everything. So it's maintenance training and cabin training and flight training and all that. So once we develop out that portal, which is where anybody who wants Boeing training would, the term one-stop shop. So that where anyone would go in order to get to Boeing training. At least the working theory right now is from the Toolbox side. Toolbox would just probably either provide a link or would somehow leverage that other portal in order to deliver training, but it wouldn't necessarily be in Toolbox itself. However, again, those are just very preliminary discussions, and we're still trying to figure out what that landscape looks like.
Sure, thanks, Kip.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Shirag. So following that question, so are there scenarios or instances where you had to push the trainings to the people who already trained? Let's say something that got changed, or the procedure of which a fault isolation is done or maintenance is done is being changed. So do you have scenarios where you had to reskill them or do the training again, or if there are, how do you do it?
So we tried to, so in general, we tried to, it's not always 100% possible. We tried to disconnect the training from the live technical documentation. So when you're talking about fault isolation and FIMs and AMMs, the aircraft maintenance manuals, those technical documents, they're being updated by the engineering teams like all the time. They're on a constant revision cycle, and they're always changing. Because they're always changing, we try to train at a higher level where it doesn't get into the details that could be affected by those constant revisions. So anything that we produce in training material, it's very heavily marked up as saying for training use only, for reference only. It's not approved for operational use and all that. So when we do update our training material, which we do from time to time, usually we don't need to push it to the folks who have previously taken that training. It's whoever comes along after we've made those revisions, they're trained to that new material. But I'm not familiar. I'm not aware of any situations where we had to actually go back and retrain somebody. It's possible, but I'm just not aware of it. But what we are talking about when we talk about our kind of our future landscape, so that aspect of getting into micro learning and modular learning, the actually, intent of that is to redeliver some material. So, as I previously described, if we're sending a technician through a very long, multi-day, week-long, 30-day long course, we are trying our best to increase the material retention, but we know it's going to be, it's almost nearly impossible to say they're going to retain 100% and retain that 100% over an extended period of time. So it's definitely valid assumption for the future, and it should be even today, that once a student goes through that initial large-scale training, once they go out and start performing their job, that's where we start delivering the micro-learning and the just-in-time training, which is it's pretty much the material they learned previously, but now it's being sent to them in much smaller bite-sized pieces so that it is more of a reminder for what they learned previously, especially if we are able to get to true adaptive in-the-field operational training delivery. We should be able to say, hey, this particular student, he took the full training 2 or 3 years ago, and based on what he's been doing since then, he probably hasn't touched this system in that length of time. Well, since it's been that long, let's give him or her a little piece of micro learning or just-in-time training, just to remind them of what they need to know for this particular system. So, going forward in the future, redelivery and retraining of material is definitely something that we want to do. It's just we want to do it in very small bite-sized pieces, so it's more of a reminder rather than that initial learning.
Okay, thanks. And one last. I'll squeeze in one last question, actually. So, the airlines are most of the times are regulated to do an yearly recertification of their technicians. So, does Beaches cater to that as well, or is it airline takes care of it? Do you know?
Typically, right now, it's mostly the airlines. So when it comes to maintenance training, there's almost no recertification requirements that are required by the regulators themselves. It's very much when it comes to absolute regulatory requirements, it's the initial training, and then in terms of keeping up with currency, it's generally up to the airline whether or not they want to do that. And it tends to vary. Some airlines they don't do any recurrent training. They just expect their technicians to perform at a certain level and be capable of doing that. And sometimes that's valid because if it's a smaller airline where the airplanes are on the ground a long time and technicians have a lot of time to diagnose and fix the aircraft, then that's probably all that's required. But some of the more forward-thinking carriers, they will do recurrent training. And in that case, it's usually custom tailored by that airline to address whatever they feel they need to address on a recurrent basis. However, from Boeing's perspective, we are trying to get us into a position where we are able to play a little bit of a bigger role in that market. So so we are trying to look into opportunities to deliver that recurrent training capability as well, and that does tie in very much to the previous story I've been telling you around operational performance. Since we are the ones that have access to that ISDP data, and we're pretty much one of the only groups out there in the industry who has that view of the entire airline fleet across customers. We're seeing that as an opportunity to start playing more in that role, because we can start identifying what are the fleet trends across everybody, and then if we're able to, on a regular basis, provide training that speaks directly to those fleet reliability trends, that's a good value proposition for a carrier, because right now a carrier only has view of their own internal issues. They may not be aware of the issues that are coming down the road, but another airline who maybe has an older fleet is starting to experience those right now. So it's a good value proposition for those airlines that hey, Boeing is now providing recurrent training that is covering everything that they're seeing in the industry versus just what my single airline is providing. So again, I don't want to. To be open and honest with this whole group, we at Boeing understand that we're a little behind the industry on certain aspects, but these are all things that we are very, very interested in following up and recognize that we need to start providing in the future. So again, and these discussions, this is great because however your teams can participate in getting us there, then we're more than happy to have those discussions and see where it goes.
Thanks, Kip.
Hey, Nandita, sorry, Shiraz, Vaishali, just 1 second. Shiraz, I will document this and share that as minutes of meeting because this will help us in a big way. Okay, Shiraz.
So, Sanjay, is that you speaking? Because you are now very, very quiet.
Yeah, we don't get you, Sanjay.
Shiraz, Sanjay here. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, Sanjay.
Shiraz, I was going to say that you document the discussion and the next steps that you identified. It's important. Okay. Vaishali, you had something to say. Go ahead.
So from the industry perspective, and I would even expand it beyond the U.S. but to globally, they're very interested in it. They have a high appetite for it. Some of the carriers themselves are already starting to experiment with within their own teams with AR/VR. The problem that we're facing right now, and what the customers have very vocally expressed, is that we as a training industry, we've been showing them proof of concepts and demos of AR/VR training solutions for several years now. I mean, for at least 3 years now. But at the same time, even though we've been demoing this and showing this stuff off, nobody has, Boeing, CAE, L3, none of us have really provided a real production-ready product that they can pick up and buy and actually start using today. So we're all scrambling to try to figure out what are those real production marketable products what do those look like, and how do we get them out there as soon as possible. So if anything, I think that's where we stand at the moment from an industry-wide perspective. Is like some of that stuff is already out there, just as demos, and the industry is almost mad at us. The customers are almost mad at us because we haven't delivered anything yet. So yeah, so the appetite is there, and we just need to start delivering things that are actually proving useful to them. I think so. Yeah. So when it comes to like the maybe not vitamin or painkiller, but it's like the actual surgery, or all of the. I apologize, I'm not doing a very good analogy of that. But when it comes to the customers, at the absolute minimum, they have to satisfy the regulatory requirements for training, and because the regulators aren't very fast moving either. There's no requirements for experiential learning, simulation, AR, VR, XR. So in order to satisfy that base regulatory requirement, that's still right now that's still the good old-fashioned way of classroom time and instructor-led presentations. That's the minimum requirement. Where AR, VR, and XR are playing that role is probably in that painkiller or vitamin type scenario where even though the minimum requirements are classroom-based, we know that the level of retention and material and knowledge retention is low coming out of that, or it's limited to a certain extent coming out of that type of learning environment. So when it comes to a carrier having fully capable, high-level, highly trained professional technicians out in the field, they're looking for solutions to drive that higher level of cognition and capability. And they're not going to be able to achieve that with instructor-led courseware, and it's going to have to be that experiential learning that comes along with AR, VR, simulation, videos, anything really that helps a student learn more than they can currently do when they're looking through a lesson book or listening to an instructor present material. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to help.
Hey Kip, thank you. We are kind of out of time now, but there are actions on both startups. They will come back with more questions or potentially, maybe another call required. I will set it up, to make this complete.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to help. So yeah, as much as you need or want to get me involved going forward, I'm more than happy to participate.
Thank you so much, Kip. I appreciate your time, and
Thanks, Kip. Thanks, Kip, for your time and for all the insights. It was really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kip.